Shalom from Jerusalem. Israel is at war. Title given to this war, Swords of Iron. Yesterday, we provided you with the first update to the various events that took place, including the atrocious terrorist attacks throughout the morning and throughout the day, of course, the thousands of rockets that have been indiscriminately launched from the Islamist Hamas territory, the Gaza Strip namely, towards Israel's southern and central communities. Joining me to update you once more on the latest, the second day of this war, are Mr. Amir Oren, TV7's editor-at-large, as well as Colonel in Reserve Reuven Ben Shalom, who is currently in the capacity of the IDF spokesperson's unit. Thank you for joining me, both of you. And I'd like to start with you immediately, Mr. Oren. Give us the latest details of the various developments today, day two to this war.
So there are four major events, not necessarily in the same order of priority. We had the continuation of the mopping up operation, which started yesterday in the southern communities along the southern border. This is at least the preparation for the counterattack on the ground, which is yet to begin. All we had up to now was Israel counterattacking from the air. The second development was a small conflagration up north, Hezbollah and Israel exchanging some fire, and it was more of a token participation by Hezbollah in the Palestinian war than actually jumping in to open the second front. The third development is being hatched as we are speaking now, and this is political. It seems as if Benny Gantz, the former Minister of Defense, will join Netanyahu's government for an emergency cabinet. Right now, we don't know what capacity, not the defense minister, for a limited period, for the duration of the war. And the fourth development is that the families of those missing in action, abducted hostages in Gaza, dozens of men, women, children, are being organized in order to put pressure on the government to get their loved ones back home.
Indeed. Well, Colonel Ben Shalom, let's start with the first point, and that is ongoing IDF activities in cooperation, of course, with special operations units from the Israel Police, Israel Border Police. What can you tell us at this stage? Have we made some progress in sterilizing the South from the Islamist terrorists, the various operatives who went on a campaign of murder? As simple as that, and have also managed, of course, as Mr. Owen mentioned in the latter part, to kidnap dozens of Israelis, women, children, elderly, as well as young men, to the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, with atrocious images coming out of the enclave, and with regard to the condition of the Israelis there.
Well, today, after this massive massacre, one would think that within several hours, you could, like you said, just sterilize the place. Well, it's not that easy. The magnitude of this attack was so broad, coming in from the ground, air, and also from naval assets that they have, speedboats, etc., under the cover of thousands of rockets, altogether overwhelmed the arena. So yesterday we poured in multiple forces, as you said, conventional and special forces, dealing all day, all night with cleaning out all these pockets of terrorists. And yet here we are on the second day, still with fighting breaking out in various points. The explanation for this is that since they breached so many points along the fence, about 30, imagine 30 various places along the fence, some with bulldozers, some just cut it open, but so many places simultaneously, and attacking dozens of villages and towns. So when you have so many people, and I can't even say what the number is, many hundreds, maybe 1,000, maybe more. So it makes sense that many were killed during the night. Many tried to come in. A lot were killed on the fence itself trying to come in. Yet many of them hid, fled to different places, and they're popping up in various places and still attacking. So as we speak, we still have several points where we have gunfights with IDF soldiers. of course, prevailing in each and every circumstance, but it's challenging and it takes time. So it's even hard to say when this will all be over, even when it's quiet. And I come and I report to you, everything's clear. The next day, they could still pop up somewhere. So it's still a great challenge. That's why you also, I think, hear that our objective now, you don't hear clear objectives on the next phase. I think Amir even alluded to this correctly, that our mission right now, our goal right now is to clear up, mop up, and stabilize the situation and bring calm first to the communities themselves. Some are still under lockdown from yesterday morning. So that's still, and I'll limit myself now to this arena because I know later you want to take on to other arenas, but the
Indeed.
fight is still happening around the Gaza Strip.
Mr. Owen, obviously, what we see is, and at least from what I was able to see, there is still a fog of war, the fog of battle, which still has not entirely cleared, but it's starting to clear, allowing for a lot more of an organized sterilization, if you will, of the territories in question. And it is really heartbreaking to see the large amounts of truly a massacre. Could you give us a little bit of an update? What are the numbers currently? And obviously, ongoing battles taking place. So we do, unfortunately, also expect additional casualties as time progresses, and that is the essence of war.
Yes, there is obviously a delay in the reporting of facts which already took place as early as yesterday morning, because once the military gets control of a certain kibbutz and find the magnitude of the atrocity, they can report on dozens more of people killed, sometimes horrendously. And therefore, the official figure right now is at least 600 killed, mostly murdered, some killed in clashes. Some of the fallen are servicemen, military, and police who have fallen in the line of duty. They were not murdered. This was their sworn duty to defend, even at the price of their own lives. But most of the casualties were civilians murdered cruelly. And the 600 plus number could go very, very high. In addition to that, you have some 2,000 wounded, either in action or by the terrorists. And you have an unknown number, at least dozens, maybe in three figures, of abducted prisoners of war, hostages.
Colonel Ben Shalom, obviously, during the course of yesterday and today, rocket fire did not cease at any given moment. And therefore, could you give us a little bit of figures? What is the amount of rockets that have been indiscriminately shot in the direction of Israel's communities and population centers throughout central and southern Israel, as well as, of course, there were various reports of failure to intercept a number of those incoming projectiles. And if you could also elaborate on that, what should the public do if people are right now listening to us here in Israel? Give them a little bit of the directives. What is the course of action that should be taken?
Mm-hmm. Well, earlier today I gave a brief to some organization, and after speaking for about 20 minutes, someone asked me, "What about rockets? You didn't mention rockets." And it hit me that, yeah, it didn't even occur to me to talk about rockets because the massacre that we saw on the ground and the atrocities committed by Hamas there are so devastating, and really the Israeli public is dealing mainly with that now. That it's almost like, oh, those rockets they usually fire, thousands of rockets overhead. That's not even our main challenge. But absolutely, this was part of their campaign. And when you fire thousands of rockets and you have an interception system like we have, the Iron Dome, which is a brilliant system, very high percentages of interception. But even if they're 95, and that's not the exact figure, but even if they're 90 or 95%, that means that some get through. It's not fail safe. It's not 100%. So when you overwhelm the system and you fire many, some are going to get through. And some did impact, including central Israel. It hit buildings, it hit a car. They were also casualties. But again, compared to the magnitude of what happened, also as far as casualties, that was not our main concern. The numbers were about 3,000 yesterday. It reached about 3,700 today. Remember that Hamas, as a terror organization, firing many of these improvised rockets, some of them just impact inside the Gaza Strip, killed Gazans. Of course, they don't care about that. And I'm counting the overall number fired towards Israel. At usually in a state of calm, and then you have an operation, what we call an operation, or several days of battle. You have to give strict regulations to the public, what to do, where to go. Now it's war, and also notice this. It's very interesting that Israel declared war from the very moment it began. Very strange for Israel, if you know us. The reason is that Hamas opened a war, launched a war, and it was clear that it was a war. There's almost no question what to call it. So don't think that this is Israel trying to shape this in a certain way. They shaped it as a war, launched an attack as a war, so we are at war. And when you are at war, the public is acting accordingly. We have various areas with the sirens. People know what to do to take cover. If they're at home, they go to their protective unit at home. If they're out in the street, to lie down and wait for 10 minutes. So here the public is very aware. And another thing you will see here, the people are mobilized. All that were called in came in. I'm getting phone calls all day, people begging to join and contribute in any way. So everyone is in this atmosphere of war, and mainly, unfortunately, thinking about the devastation of families that lost their loved ones, civilians and soldiers alike.
Indeed. Mr. Oren, obviously you referred to, in your initial remark, to Israel's current activities vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip, aerial strikes on multiple targets. It's quite interesting that while there is a preparatory deployment, as Colonel Ben Shalom just noted, from the IDF and the preparations, of course, before the massive invasion. And I'm not so certain that Hamas is going to come out at the other end. But when we're talking particularly about this stage in this war, strategic targets, Hamas infrastructure, and cells, terrorists, which are still trying to cross into Israel or still remain in Israeli territory. What can you tell us more about that?
So let me first give you the flavor of not what is happening, but the mood here. I happen to be in Jaffa right now, south of Tel Aviv, and I have walked around several sectors of Tel Aviv while reaching Jaffa, and it's a ghost town. Part of that, and you both alluded to it, part of that is because people obey the home front directives. They know that should a siren sound, and usually it's during either noontime or 8 p.m. Primetime television, they should be only a few minutes away from a shelter or from a safe place in their buildings or in their apartments. And the other part is because people of military service age have apparently been called up because the IDF is preparing its best divisions, both mostly reserves or some reserve units complementing regular forces for the possibility of another front opening up or for going into Gaza. Now, yes, Hamas has expected these retaliatory air raids. Maybe they didn't have such an impact on its resilience. It has gone underground. There was a report that even the hostages were spirited into tunnels so that the IDF will not reach them. But if there is no outside pressure for a ceasefire, we are only in the preliminary stages of a longer campaign.
Colonel Ben Shalom?
Well, I concur with Amir, and just wanted to point out that we're asked a lot about the duration of the war or the campaign. And remember that the directive right now that we're getting has to do with the stage we're in. So naturally, if we're still dealing with fighting around the Gaza Strip inside Israeli territory, clearing village after village, certainly this is what we have to focus on now. And looking at the next phase, it's a matter for the political echelon to decide. Their calculation, of course, is to be long term. Whatever they decide they want to see as the endpoint of this war, then they will have to break it down and make their way back to the orders the IDF gets. The IDF could do anything. We're mobilizing forces as we speak, preparing for anything. In Israel, many times the discussion is around the ground maneuver. And I think maybe in our opening comments, we discussed as if that's a given. So it's not, because we could launch various of operations or options. One of them is a ground maneuver, all the way up to toppling the regime of Hamas. This is all a matter of what the government decides and what orders the IDF gets. The IDF now is, besides clearing the area, is looking multidimensional, multi-arena, amassing forces, preparing the plans, and any order that we will get, we'll be able to launch it in that direction.
Both of you alluded to the fact that this may turn into a multi-sector war, Bistro, and you also noted at your opening remarks, particularly about the fact that there were already exchanges of fire between the IDF and the Iranian proxy Hezbollah. We heard and we communicated about this also yesterday. President Joe Biden from the United States and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant and also the opposition leaders here in Israel, namely Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz particularly, they all warn Hezbollah not to get drawn into this story, even though Iran may have its interests, of course, but let's not speculate about that. Let's focus currently on the northern arena. Where are we at this point?
So up to now, Hezbollah went through the motions of taking part in a token way in the fight and announcing that what happened with Hamas is not only a Palestinian operation or a Palestinian victory. Obviously, if up to now it has turned out to be such a success, Hezbollah wants to have some part of the glory. If it turns out that Hamas will be decimated, Hezbollah won't have any part of it. Now, there is an interrelationship between the two organizations, even though Hezbollah is Shiite, Hamas is Sunni. In 2006, Hamas, along with other groups, managed to abduct an Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit. So less than 2 weeks later, Hezbollah tried it and again managed to abduct two Israeli soldiers, which started the Lebanon campaign of that summer. Now, Israel believed that its devastating blows on the Dahya, on the Hamas compound, on the Hezbollah compound in Beirut, will have a deterrent effect. And it did have this effect on Hezbollah, but not on Hamas, which is why 2 years later only we had Operation Cast Lead in Gaza. So it's not really a direct influence. Once you do something to one of the organizations, the other one is fearful that this will happen to it too. And as you said, Hezbollah, while being funded and trained and directed by Iran, still has its own interests. It is first and foremost a Lebanese organization.
Colonel Ben Shalom, I'd like to hear your take on this.
Well, it's interesting for me to be hosted in this capacity. I'm so used to being there as a civilian and commentator, and here I am in the capacity of an official spokesperson, so I'm limiting myself to that. Certainly, we're looking at the northern arena with concern from the moment this began. And the big difference here would be that Hamas was able to launch a surprise attack in the south, and it was, unfortunately, a surprise attack. And it took us time, of course, to respond. And the day after we're still dealing with it, it's a whole different ballgame in the north, because we're thinking about that option, preparing our forces there, mobilizing. All eyes are on that arena. And so there would be no surprise there. And the calculation of Hezbollah here should be, is it worth it? Now, I always say, they have different calculations that we have. Their long-term objectives are not peace and prosperity, but promoting their jihadist objectives. Sometimes even suffering and even devastation for Lebanon can serve them. Yet here, it would probably be a grave mistake for them to do it as we are preparing in a way to annihilate any such penetration to Israel. Why would you do such a thing if you get a 1-ton bomb on your head when you're just trying to cross the border? Yet we are prepared for that arena. Don't see, besides, like Amir said, that token action this morning that was dealt with locally, don't see signs that this is going to happen up there. But if it does, of course, we're ready. The whole arena there is prepared also as far as the civilian population, and our doctrine here even changed during the years. So I hope that this arena stays as it is, but the IDF is looking now multi-dimensional, multi-arena, even inward, Judea and Samaria, Israeli Arab towns that we had conflicts in the past in one of the last operations. So we do have to look at this holistically and be prepared all aspects.
I think it's important to highlight once again, and you mentioned this earlier, Colonel Ben Shalom, the fact that everybody is mobilized. Whoever can be mobilized is currently mobilized, and this preparatory work is not just for Gaza. The IDF is prepared for a multi-sector war, and that is what is currently being prepared for in full scale. And therefore, Mr. Oren, when we're looking at the messages coming from abroad and we're hearing what is being said, it seems like there is quite the backing. I know that the backing usually is temporary during the war itself, excuse me, but nonetheless, when we really look at the current state of reality, we do understand that the international community is understanding the gravity of the situation and has been getting prepared for this reality, knowing that it's going to arrive. The question is when. Have we arrived at that moment in time?
So when you speak of the international community, you probably don't mean the Russians and the Chinese and several others. You mean the United States and its allies and partners. Now, yesterday, when President Biden called Prime Minister Netanyahu, Secretary of State Blinken called his colleagues from Great Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, and Qatar, as well as Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority. And obviously, he wanted to make sure that the American backing for Israel has its own backing, at least for the defensive part. It doesn't mean that once Israel goes on a ground attack in Gaza and civilian casualties there mount, you will still have this diplomatic support. Now, the United States is committed to supplying Israel with anti-missile missiles if it needs them, or the financial resources in order to produce them back home in Israel, and perhaps some other munitions such as small diameter bombs and other aerial stuff. But it doesn't mean that Israel has a blank check.
Of course, putting into context also for our viewers, the fact of the matter is what happened yesterday is like Israel's 9/11. And when the United States treats Israel with the backing, the way Israel treated the United States during 9/11 and the following events, that is something that is to be expected, and not only of the United States, but other countries as well. We do not have very much time left, and I like to take this opportunity to ask you, Colonel Ben Shalom, particularly about the hostages that have been brutally kidnapped by the terrorists from the Hamas organization and their affiliated terrorist groups. What can families do in order to reach the IDF? There is still the fog of war, as we all know. Nevertheless, many people are missing. Some are emerging, thank God, from different places where they've been hiding now for quite some time. But nonetheless, the situation is quite grave. That I understood there was a lot of criticism on this.
Criticism, and probably rightfully so from the perspective of the families, because of the magnitude, because of the fog of war. just imagine people are missing. You don't even know if they're missing, killed, captive, extremely challenging. I see here great efforts now underway. I don't want to quote exactly the nomination, but I heard even the Prime Minister is speaking about nominating probably one of our brilliant generals to deal with it. And this should be a first and foremost effort from our part to reach out and touch each and every family, full disclosure, information, and accompanying them, because this is a devastating situation. And it's not a matter of days. It could be long. Hamas plays the long game here. They showed this, they demonstrated it in the past. Even if we do go now to a ground maneuver, a ground campaign, it will be extremely challenging with live Israelis inside of Gaza Strip. So certainly, besides the war and the campaign and defeating the enemy, we have to keep a very close eye on our civilians and soldiers that are held as hostages.
Indeed. Well, unfortunately, Amir, we have run out of time. Give us half a sentence, if you will.
Just helping Reuven Ben Shalom, because it was made public already, Brigadier General Gal Hirsch, a very smart and seasoned retired officer, will take care of the POWs and the hostages.
Well, this is all the time that we have, and I'd like to take also a brief opportunity to ask parents, particularly. There's a lot of gruesome pictures that children should not watch, and for that matter, also adults who have not been hardened by war should also not watch, from my perspective at least, and therefore keep it taps, make sure that they don't have access. There are a lot of irresponsible actors on social media, in Telegram particularly, and other places, which publish things because they've been so used to seeing those things by now that they don't really see the red lines that shouldn't be crossed, particularly for children. So this is a plea from me to you. With that, Mr. Oren, Colonel Ben Shalom, thank you for so very much for taking out of your times once more. And I'd like also to thank all of you at home as well for taking out of your times to get updated with the situation. Moreover, I'd like to say that at 9 p.m. this evening, I will be here once more hosting the former U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, Colonel Joel Rayburn, where we'll discuss the matter of the lack of a U.S. grand strategy, which is impacting global events and has been quite the issue in Washington, with implications also for Israel and the peace of Jerusalem. So stay tuned. Until then, shalom from Jerusalem.
Shalom, I'm Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy foreign minister and member of Knesset. Today, I'm very privileged to be hosting TV7's Middle East Review and also being a panelist of the various shows of TV7, which I find the most enlightening, most educating if you really want to understand the world, the global scene as well as the regional scene of the Middle East. It is worthwhile to watch TV7.